Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pandora Matherlees, and as Luxury Director of IORMA, it is my pleasure to invite you to this webinar this afternoon. The title of our webinar is Diamonds, the Ultimate Luxury Asset, Heirloom, Gift, Commodity, Jewellery, Gemstone, or if you're the ultra rich, perhaps trinket for your portfolio. I think that we should all realize already that the diamond industry is quite a significant one, and it contributes enormously to GDP, and it affects the commercial GDP globally. And this is where I would like to introduce IORMA, because IORMA is a global association for consumer commerce. And luxury is a key part of that, obviously. So IORMA is a neutral resource, and it's aimed at governments and industry and, of course, consumers. And what we are looking to do is to really understand, research, and really uncover the motivations and behavioral aspects of our 7.8 billion consumers around on the planet. So we need to look at how they buy, how we deliver goods and services to them. And John Andrews, our chairman, who started IORMA, founded it a few years ago now, has always been very forward-looking, looking at new technology and how it can deliver these goods and services to consumers even better. So this afternoon, we've got about an hour, and the first 45 minutes is going to be questions to the panelists and discussion with the panelists. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So small housekeeping point is that if you would like to pose any questions, please do so throughout the webinar, and we will try to get to them and answer them. So we have a really amazing panel of specialists here this afternoon, and I think you're going to find it absolutely fascinating. We have 4 specialists with really a great expertise and long-standing experience in the diamond industry. And I would like to start by just introducing them. They're going to say 1-minute icebreaker to tell you something about them and what they do, and then we'll come on to the discussion. So could I start, please, with you, John Benjamin, who many people may be familiar with from the Antiques Roadshow. John, could you say a couple of words about yourself?
Thank you very much indeed, Pandora, and good afternoon to everybody who is attending this webinar. John Benjamin, I have been working in the jewellery business for, nearly 50 years. I started off as a 17-year-old in 1972. Working for a small old jewellery shop in Bloomsbury called Cameo Corner. After I gained my gemology, the examination FGA, I moved on to a sale room called Phillips. Now that's not the Phillips of today, it's the Phillips of the older days, Phillips Son and Neal as it used to be called. I stayed at Phillips, and then for 23 years, until finally leaving Phillips, I was international head of the jewellery side there, responsible for the sales that took place in London and Geneva. After I left Phillips in 1999, I became an independent jewellery consultant and historian. I lecture all over the world on jewellery. I specialise in Renaissance, 17th century and Georgian jewellery. I also talk about Fabergé. I'm a writer. I've published a number of books on jewellery, and also, yes, I do the Antiques Roadshow on television, something of a national institution that's been going now for something like 43 years. That's my background. Thank you, Pandora.
Thank you, John. And I'm delighted to be a fellow liveryman in the Worshipful Company of Art Scholars with you. And I've heard you speak many times, which has been really, really interesting. So could I move on to another old colleague back from university, fellow art historian, Helen Dimmock. Helen and I were at university, I think it must be something like 30 years ago. I can't believe it, Helen, but good to see you here. And could you just say a couple of words as well?
Absolutely, Pandora. It's wonderful to see you again, and thank you for inviting me today. So yes, as well as being an art history graduate, I'm also a gemologist, a diamond grader, and a jewellery specialist. I actually started my career working for John at Phillips, but my career morphed into more retail, and that's what I've done for many, many years. Today, I hold several honorary positions. I am the National Association of Jewellers Retail Ambassador, and I'm also a trade guardian for the Assay Office. I had my own retail businesses, which I actually sold a few years ago. I also work as an independent jewellery consultant. Although I'm primarily based in the UK, I do some international work. I advise the Indian government on bilateral trade opportunities. I work for corporate, I work for businesses, manufacturers, designers, but I also work with people for bespoke inquiries. I work under the identity of the jewel matcher because I have two passions in life. It's people and jewellery, and it's how to put them together with authority, credibility, transparency, and trust.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting. I think I shall have to get you to match me to some jewels fairly soon. So moving on, thank you, Helen, to Joanna Park-Tonks. Joanna, it's a pleasure to welcome you here. And I know you're going to present a slightly different aspect of the industry to us. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Good afternoon, everyone. A real honour to be included in such an illustrious panel. Thank you very much. So my name is Joanna Park-Tonks. I'm the founder and creator of Chelsea Rocks, which is an online retailer specialising in fine jewellery made exclusively from laboratory-grown diamonds. And diamonds are really my passion. And I believe really an exciting topic of debate this afternoon is going to be the laboratory-grown segment, which I'm representing. I believe them to be as beautiful and as scintillating, as fascinating as mine diamonds. And I very much look forward to this conversation and debate amongst peers this afternoon.
Thank you, Joanna. And so we have three specialists here who are actually selling diamonds, but we also have a branding specialist with us who's going to sort of be the glue to pull this all together for us and help us understand how to approach the market. And that is Julie Hucker. Hello, Julie. Great to see you here. And could you tell us a little bit more about what you do? You're on mute. I think Julie's on mute.
Can you
yes,
hear me now?
Well done, yes.
Hang on a second.
It's not a webinar if someone hasn't been on mute.
Exactly. Thank you so much for including me as well today. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be amongst really expert, I think, experience and expertise in sharing our knowledge today in such a really unprecedented times and challenging times for every business and every individual. I really work predominantly in branding and brand communications. I specialize in really helping brands and individuals, companies put together a really strong brand strategy. So sometimes it's just boosting the strategy that are in place. Other times it's creating a strategy for them and really looking at a model that helps them grow and achieve their goals. We work in three key areas, which is visibility, communications, and brand positioning. And my background has been in the diamond jewelry industry for probably about now nearly over 10 years. And I originally started working in personal branding and then was fortunate enough to be working with one of the leading traders in the diamond trading company, Gembel European Sales Group, and ran their international marketing, branding and communications based in Antwerp and also in London. And then I moved into really selling high value diamonds and diamond jewelry to ultra high net worth individuals as well. And branding to me is something I'm really, really passionate about and really believe. And I believe at this time, in terms of the pandemic, it's even more important that we spend really a finite focus on how we can communicate and communicate the value that we bring to our consumers and get really, really focused on that. So it's a very short introduction, but I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Pandora. That's great.
Thank you, Julie. Incredible amount of expertise in one virtual room. My name, as I said, is Pandora Mather-Lees, and in addition to being luxury director of IORMA, I run artonsuperyachts.com, which is dedicated to preserving and conserving the billions of pounds worth of art on super yachts floating around in international waters. And believe you me, it does run into billions. So my role is training captains, crew, yacht management, and the industry at large, and also to assist the insurance industry and others with conducting surveys to make sure that they are not falling foul of legal export risks, as well as the proper management of the art. So we would like to start with a poll. David, if you could put up our first poll, because we would like to try and identify really what your knowledge of diamonds is at the beginning of this webinar, and whether you consider yourself familiar with the differences between mined, laboratory produced, or antiques. So while this is up, I'd just like to say, really, I keep thinking to myself, what is it about diamonds and this industry that we find so intriguing generation after generation? And we hope here with this discussion to unearth different perspectives on perceived consumer value and prestige in diamond purchases, and particularly looking at this area of how mined and antique pieces sit against their laboratory grown counterparts. So a good place to start, really, and we have here quite a few people, 72% perhaps think that they're not so familiar. Well, we're going to run a similar poll at the end, so I hope that that little chart will change quite significantly. So I think a good place to start is really looking at how one evaluates diamonds from the perspective of the panelists. And so looking at how you would value a diamond in what is an $80 billion industry, by the way. Perhaps I could come first to John and ask you, John, how you would go about evaluating diamonds for your clients.
Thank you. Well, as far as being a valuer is concerned, there are so many different factors that affect how you value jewellery altogether. You've got to factor in things like provenance, of course, who may have owned the items. But speaking as someone who very much specialises in the pieces of great age and antiquity, quite a lot of the time I'm looking at a stone from the basis of obviously the key factors, the carat, the color, the clarity, but also the integrity of the stone. So if I take a Georgian necklace, and I recently had to value a Georgian necklace made in around about 1795, old diamonds set in a line of graduated stones. Now, typically with old Georgian diamonds, you expect them to be cut in slightly misshapen ways. They're often quite thick. They aren't as regular as a modern diamond. And so the way you go about valuing a diamond necklace like that, you take into account all the different aspects of it. But the particular key feature of this particular necklace was that the diamonds probably came from mines which are now not being used. And so a diamond necklace of the Georgian period may come from somewhere like India, for instance, and they have a particular soft beauty and brilliance about these old stones. Often antique stones aren't necessarily perfect clarity. They can be flawed and have imperfections in them, but they're often a very beautiful color. When we say color, the best color for diamond is actually colorless. So a Georgian diamond will often be very, very free of color. When we say color, often the diamond is graded according to how much tint of yellow it may have. Well, this particular necklace is a good example. All the diamonds were very, very pure, fine color, but they also had a certain number of flaws throughout them. Now, unlike a modern diamond, you look at a diamond necklace such as that from the context of the carat weight, of course, the cut of the stones, and looking at the stones themselves, they were a little bit spotted with inclusions internally. However, you then have to factor in the key component, which is the rarity and singularity of a Georgian diamond necklace, which, let's face it, are very rare nowadays. Many antique necklaces and brooches were simply broken up in the 20th century to make into modern stones. That creates a whole new ballgame, because you've got to understand that with an antique diamond necklace, you've got to factor in the rarity of the piece itself. And that can lift the value far above the value of just the core diamonds. So I'm looking at it, I work out the calculation of the diamonds themselves, and then I have to factor in the rarity and the commercial viability of that necklace, which sometimes can be far, far higher than just the weight of the goods themselves. So that's a pretty good example of how I would go about it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's really interesting. Helen Dimmock, could I perhaps put that same question to you about how you'd go about valuing a diamond for your clients?
Absolutely, and I'm rather hoping that some definitions might help everybody watching today. By definition, a gemstone is rare, durable and beautiful, and John has talked about the rarity of a Georgian diamond necklace. When we're valuing stones, we have devices such as the 4 Cs, which will help us look at the durability and the beauty. But the key issue that John has identified is the rarity. With reference to historical pieces, the Indian diamonds that he refers to are so much rarer. They were found in secondary river deposits, sort of the 18th century. Crucially, in the latter part of the 19th century, 1869, primary deposits of diamonds were found, and suddenly there was, if you like, an explosion of diamonds onto the market. With the increase in supply came the confidence to cut away more of the crystal rough, which unlocks, if you like, the modern round brilliant and gives you that sort of sparkle and that more like, I would define it as electricity, whereas John's referring to the beauty of a historical piece, and older diamonds to me look like candlelight. They're really, really lovely. And so with the increased supply came the opportunity to look more at the 4 Cs. I really want to concentrate on that definition though, rare, durable and beautiful, because you've mentioned laboratory grown diamonds. Physically, chemically and optically, they are identical to a diamond, but they are grown in a laboratory and therefore their supply is consistent and i.e. not so rare. So I would state, to bring this all together, that a laboratory grown diamond is a diamond, it's not a gemstone. And we have the normal criteria for looking at contemporary stones, and then we have this additional rarity with the antique pieces as well.
Thank you. Well, that's a very neat segue onto Joanna Park-Tonks. Perhaps you could sort of expand a little bit on the laboratory grown sector and how you value your diamonds for your clients.
Absolutely. Great points on both sides of the fence. And I would just like to preface this discussion by saying that I celebrate all diamonds, be they a result of the miracles of nature created through the Earth's natural geological processes, or what I like to term man-made brilliance. You know, laboratory-grown diamonds are a celebration of man-made innovation, technology, and ingenuity. And I think that that needs to be applauded as well. So I'd like to pick up on a couple of points which Helen so deftly made. First of all, just to reiterate that laboratory-grown diamonds are 100% diamond. They're not cubic zirconia, they're not Swarovski crystal, they're bona fide diamond. And a reputable supplier of laboratory-grown diamonds would typically certify the diamonds, i.e. provide you with a certificate, which also speaks to John's point about provenance, although provenance perhaps in a more scientific vein than a historical one. So I think that the idea of provenance is still very important. And let's face it, not all laboratory-grown diamonds are created equal, even if they are created or birthed in a laboratory instead of the earth. So provenance, quality and supply is the other theme that I would like to touch upon. You may have heard of the Argyle Diamond, which was celebrated for its most beautiful pink diamonds, which are known as fancy diamonds in the trade. So this has recently closed. So increasingly, we're facing a scarcity of supply in the mine segment, which will inevitably cause people to consider laboratory-grown diamonds. And as regards to their value, I believe that diamonds are celebrated for their beauty, for their sentimental value, for their expression of love as a symbol of eternal love. But of course, everyone has a budget. And laboratory grown diamonds typically are 20 to 30% less expensive than their mined counterparts. So I'd really like to put it to you that laboratory grown diamonds allow people who perhaps are on a more limited budget to partake in a diamond, or even to create an opportunity whereby consumers can purchase a bigger or a brighter or a better diamond for the same price that they might spend on a mined diamond.
Thank you, Joanna. I love that. It's democratization of diamonds, and everyone can probably aspire to own one, which is really fantastic in today's society. So 3 different perspectives. Julie Hucker,
Yes.
I understand that obviously you have your 3 pillars of branding in your consultancy. Perhaps you could talk about that and how it would relate to these 3 different scenarios we've got here, with really what might be called different types of products as far as the consumer is concerned.
Sure, Pandora. In terms of the 3 pillars, I still think that they're absolutely essential. I mean, 1, 2, and 3, visibility, communication, brand positioning. And I say that there's so much behind each one. I mean, the visibility is not just how you present your brand and the products and the value that you offer. It's also about really what or how people are perceiving you online. And then you've got your communication and being really clear about who you're actually talking to from a brand's perspective. So making the world really stand up and notice you, who you are, what your values are, how you differentiate compared to your competitors, being really clear about that. And then obviously your positioning is, I would describe that in terms of your brand positioning as your more higher level networking, your PR strategy, how you actually interact with your audience. Sometimes what I've done with clients is we look at the brand strategy as in 4 different elements. And that is looking at the brand, the niche, the offer, and then the result. And we turn that around, sort of reverse engineering that, whereas you look at what are you trying to achieve as a brand? What are your financial goals? What goals are they? Get really, really clear about that. And then looking at the offer, and are you really clear in terms of what is your offer? And nowadays, with the pandemic as it is, people need more support. We need more reassurance. We need more visibility in terms of how we are answering the consumer's needs and addressing all of those. So it's becoming even more and more important that you're able to address those, in my opinion, and also showing some continuity. How are you responding to your clients' needs during this time, some level of continuity? What are you doing during this time? And what kind of stories do you want to be written about you during the pandemic and when this is over? Because it will eventually be over, and we're seeing that today as we're beginning to open up. I think also the human element. I think we need to be even more human in how we approach things. So there's really been a lack of trust, I think, sometimes in the industry. So being really transparent about who you are. For example, what's a good example? Just in terms of conflict diamonds. So being really sure that you're non-conflict, and what does that actually mean to you and the consumer, because the consumer now is just so educated. There's so much online. So it's about communicating in a way that's really resonating and to your target audience. One of the biggest growth areas is China, as I'm sure we all know, and how to actually resonate to the Chinese consumer. And being clear about how to go about that and what narrative you need to use in order to be really clear and resonate and develop that trust with your consumers. I hope that answers what you're looking for.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I understand from the little that I've learned preparing for this webinar that India, China, and the US by far is the biggest market, and that kind of ties in with what we know about the luxury market anyway, which is about 2-3 trillion euros annually, I think. So it's a significant market. But I'd like to pick up on your point about personalization and turn to John Benjamin, because you're talking about this sort of personalized aspect, and a lot of what we are moving to now is sort of digital sales and online. And John, you're a real traditionalist. You started, at the age of 17. I won't ask you how long ago that was.
Too long.
You're working really in a personal way with your clients. And how does that pan out? And how important is that in terms of, what Julie's just been saying about marketing? And, how do you reconcile those?
Well, that's the one thing that links all of the panel. We deal with people. I think we put people first. Yes, I suppose the title one gives it is that we deal with private clients. We act as their ambassadors. There's all sorts of words that you can use, but essentially the key to this is you're dealing with people. And it was interesting. There was one word that Julie used that I want to pick up on. She used the word reassurance. And yes, we're in the business of reassuring people. If someone wants to buy a diamond, whatever it is, antique piece of jewelry, whatever the item is, they need reassurance. And a diamond, whether it's a Georgian diamond or an Art Deco diamond or a modern diamond, it provides a degree of comfort, reassurance to people. I use an expression when I give my lectures. I say that a diamond, whatever it might be, is a lightning conductor for people. And that's why people love wearing diamonds, because it makes them feel good. Of course it does, but it gives them a sense of visible security, comfort, whatever it may be. And that is a terribly important factor for people because it goes deeply into the psychology of people. So I think if there's one thing about a diamond, it taps into that need that people have got. So I think we'll probably, as the session goes on, we'll talk about the difference between antique jewellery and a modern diamond, a lab manufactured diamond, and all these different issues. But essentially, we're all part of that same package for people. So yes, it's very important when I have my clients, a client will contact me and they'll say, look, I'm looking for a diamond ring or whatever it may be. And what's key to this is that that item should be something that they can identify with, that they can look at and enjoy wearing, and all the issues that everyone has when they want to buy and wear a piece of jewellery, but essentially that it will go far beyond just a glittery stone, that it does something powerful for the psyche as well. And unless a buyer has got that connection with the item, whether it's a diamond ring or a sapphire necklace or whatever it may be, then it's not going to work for them. And it's very interesting. Helen knows this, having worked in the auction business with me in parallel for a number of years, is that often, unless people have got that essential core connection with the piece of jewelry that they're wearing, they want to sell it. They don't want to keep it. They just can't connect with it. So the connection is key. The personal involvement, the word sentimentality is crucial. So I suppose you could call me a trader in sentimentality. That is perhaps the core of what it is that I do.
That's a great phrase. Thank you. Well, Helen, coming back to you, perhaps you with your sort of very wide overview of the market, could you sort of really help us reconcile this issue between, the historical diamond and the mined and its lab-grown counterpart?
Yeah. I hope I can bring everybody together. I think that for me, we're in an industry of love, and we can use whatever devices we want to do to rate, to value, to position that stone. John has hit the nail on the head. It's the storytelling, it's the sentiment. I referred to the definition of diamonds being rare, durable, and beautiful. Isn't that the ultimate embodiment of what we think love is? And I think that's really essential. I've also had to say that post-pandemic, I've noticed more of my clients really wanting the reassurance of connecting with a diamond, finding the diamond that talks to them. And there's more of an understanding of not saying, well, a D flawless is the best diamond. No, a D flawless is the whitest, purest diamond, but looking at other stones, other colours. There's a phenomenon that's recently come about that we're looking at stones now with greater inclusions in them. I personally think we're responding to nature, we're respecting nature more, and haven't we come full circle with the antique? But Julie, these are positioned as salt and pepper diamonds. But you know, now people are wanting to reassure their loved ones and spend their money on making that moment, marking that occasion. And all of our significant occasions in our life are denoted by the giving and receiving of a piece of jewellery, and a diamond being the ultimate. We think of more bridal occasions as well. I actually, though, very comfortably also work with laboratory grown diamonds for the reasons that Joanna has stated, and that is it enables more people by the price accessibility to also own that beauty, that gemstone. And providing we are transparent and authoritative and tell the exact story of where that diamond has come from, state its different value and the reasons why it's so different, then I believe that the two can live together very, very harmoniously. What I don't ever like to see is discrediting one or the other. We know that actually diamonds, antique diamonds and contemporary diamonds, there's less and less diamonds out there. They're going to become rarer. They're going to become more and more expensive. And there is the opportunity for laboratory grown diamonds to plug that gap.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Helen. And, you know, I'm sort of hearing authenticity, integrity, trust, as well as sort of sentiment and love aspect, which are the sort of softer sides of buying and choosing and selling a diamond, maybe. Joanna, perhaps we could come to you on this, because obviously, you know, you've got a very in-depth perspective in terms of laboratory grown diamonds, and perhaps we could look at the areas or the role that perhaps certification and grading of diamonds plays for you, and how you educate consumers in the laboratory grown diamonds and sort of what they're about and how they relate to consumers.
Absolutely. So my strategy is to be as credible and as transparent as I can possibly be. And if you care to look at my website, which you can find at chelsea-rocks.com, you'll see that I've got a lot of third-party information resources that I've vetted across all different types of media from all over the world, reporting on laboratory grown diamonds. So if you fancy taking a deep dive, don't take my word for it. There's a lot of information out there. So I'm really passionate about creating a portal where consumers can educate themselves. To speak on the issue of certification, we work with gemologists such as Helen Dimmick to really replicate the in-store experience, because we are an online retailer, but trust is at the core of every good purchase, I believe. So we offer this gemological service where people can, you know, ask questions about laboratory grown diamonds, maybe challenge some of the myths that have been propagated in the media, and really make the whole process as intimate online as it might be in store, really leading with transparency of information, education and certification.
Thank you. Coming on to Julie, perhaps you'd like to comment on that, Julie, and really look at how would one position oneself in the position of Joanna, John and Helen, really in terms of being able to stand out and have a very clear message to the consumer.
Well, it all sounds excellent. I mean, I believe these days we have to be so strong in our visuals. So, you know, your visuals these days have to be like bright, beautiful, you know, just really, I think, somewhat really articulating whether the heritage or the modernity of the type of jewels that you're or jewelry that you're offering. And as well as that, then bring in those, the human element or the emotions as well, and presenting that is often quite challenging. But I know all of you are, you know, I think you look fantastic. There was one company that I would just like to mention that was mentioned in the FT the other day, which was called Vilta. And they're based in Paris, and their visuals are so stunning and beautiful. My husband. It's funny. I told him not to do that. And, anyway, but
it just proves that we're live, Julie.
That's great, and we're authentic. So, but one point, this particular company, which is Jewellery, that they state that they are present at the source of every step of the value chain. They have, really unprecedented traceability and quality control, which is what Joanna was also saying as well. They're also very much aware of social economic benefits, and really making sure that, the companies that they do work with as their partners, that they have a low impact on the environment. So and being, which is what we talked about, which is non-conflict, exclusive diamonds that are regulated by the Kimberley process as well. These are, I think, I really loved this new brand for me personally. But in terms of like the big risers that we see who are doing well, which is, I think I'd like to mention, which is Amazon, Microsoft, Spotify, Netflix, Adobe, although not necessarily luxury. Interbrand talks about how they have created a continual presence. They're focused on trust. They're communicating with empathy to consumers, and they're reinventing themselves. They're putting digital at the very, very forefront of their business plan and their business strategy. And they're extremely adaptable. And I think that's what we all have to be these days, extremely adaptable and resilient, listen more, and come up with new ways in order to be as relevant as possible to your target consumer, and really defining what it is which is going to which differentiates you compared to your competitors, and really going beyond that and getting to know your competitors intimately, and to understand your consumers intimately as well. But just going back to what I started off with, those three things to me are a key: the visibility, the communication, the brand positioning, and then how you link those through are really, really important. And today, with great humility, and I think in great empathy, would be my tips. Yeah.
Thank you. There was a question raised, in fact, by IORMA's Jane Calvert-Lee about whether consumers are concerned about how the diamond's been mined and the conditions of miners, for example, when they buy a diamond. And you mentioned this Kimberley process, and I know that the Kimberley process was sponsored by De Beers, and it was supposed to impose a standard by which people could buy diamonds and feel happy and safe in that, and have, ensure that they've got integrity. So it's important that you mentioned that. I'd like to come back to, yeah. So I'd like to come back to John, because it's a question I asked at our sort of webinar briefing about ownership, because I come from the art world, and in the art world, you value paintings in many, many different ways. And one of those is who's previously owned it, condition, all sorts of other things that go along with that. And John, really having antiques and diamonds that are bought at auctions, which have got their own heritage and their own story, and perhaps really special settings. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? And sort of, obviously, there's a lot of famous diamonds that we hear about, one that Richard Burton bought for Elizabeth Taylor. It'd be really interesting to hear your perspective on those and how previous ownership might play into this.
Well, the Burton Taylor diamond is the one that's always going to be rolled out, but provenance is key, very important indeed, and it's a factor that the sale rooms play on all the time, because it's a truth that people want to own jewellery that was formerly owned by famous people, and the sale rooms, auction houses, and we all know who they are very keen on prospering that fact. So if something has got a particular background to it, particularly it can connect with someone who's famous, a celebrity, a film star, Elizabeth Taylor, the Duchess of Windsor. That was probably the most famous auction that took place, gosh, a long time ago now, almost a quarter of a century ago. Every lot sold out at prices that were utterly stupendous, because people wanted to own a piece of jewellery that was owned by the Duchess of Windsor. So this is another layer of psychology with people that they want to own something that was formerly owned by someone famous or well known. With antique jewellery, of course, the diamond is timeless. It can go back thousands of years. A piece of jewellery can be 18th century. I mentioned I particularly specialize in things like Renaissance and 17th century jewellery. These old pieces of jewellery have a kind of a mystery about them. And that's very potent when you're trying to sell an item to a client, whether it's at auction, privately, something that you can say goes back to the continent made in 1690. My goodness me, it's got a heavy weight of history attached to it. So yes, provenance is key, and we see that all the time. Only a few weeks ago, for instance, the Mountbatten jewellery made an extraordinary amount of money. There are some pieces coming up in the next few months, little Victorian, really very modest pieces that have a direct connection going through to Queen Victoria, and they will make a stupendous amount of money as a result of that. So that I'm going to set that aside. I may be going off on a slight tangent here, but I do want to make one important point, and that is whilst I am, yes, a traditionalist, I suppose I'm criticised sometimes for always looking backwards, never looking forwards. That is the curse of the work that I do. But I also think it's very important as we go forward. I've never known in my lifetime, in my career in jewellery, 50 years career in jewellery, such a time of enormous change. Jewellery, antique jewellery, what I specialise in, is becoming an anachronism. It is all in the past. The shops that used to sell this in the traditional London West End market are shrinking. There's far fewer of them than there used to be. Which is sad, because unless the retail shops have got this kind of material to sell, people just don't understand it. But also people like me must not be stick in the mud. I have to recognize that the future is changing. And this is where laboratory grown diamonds are, I believe, going to be very important. Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not for the next 5 or 10 years, but there will be a point after that when they are accepted, recognized for their quality and rarity, and they will be the stones of choice. And I must understand that and accept the fact that perhaps my world is coming to an end, and there is now a future which is going to be different. And it may not be something I'm used to, or the people that I work with may be used to, but we must embrace that. We must embrace change. So for someone like Joanna, this is her time. And I think she's coming into the market at exactly the right time. And that is a point that I think is a very important point to make for the future going forward.
Timing is indeed important, and perhaps Joanna, we could come back to you to respond to that. And we did have a question actually about how the laboratory grown diamond is produced, and I just wonder if you feel that consumers are confused. How do we really educate them to make the right purchasing decision, and how are you going to build your message, I guess, in the future?
Yes, I think the most important thing is to inform oneself and try to read as much as possible about laboratory grown diamonds. And I think the most compelling thing, when I started my own learning journey with laboratory grown diamonds, previously I worked for De Beers in marketing in London and also in Milan. And it's only really in the last few years that gemological grade of diamonds have been available for, jewelry usage. And the thing that really brought it home to me was I took a shopping trip and I saw a classic engagement ring in a high street retailer in America, which was a round 1 carat G color engagement ring on the market at $12,000. And whilst you can't get absolutely identical diamonds, like for like, head on head comparison in laboratory grown was marketed for $6,000. And I really believe that seeing is believing. And if you're thinking about buying laboratory grown diamond, I would invest some time in researching both online and offline in a retail setting as well, to really see that unless you have a very specialist piece of kit, you cannot tell the difference between a laboratory grown diamond and a mined diamond of similar quality. Even a gemologist can't tell. So the man on the street definitely can't tell. And they are both diamonds. And I just like to say props to John, chapeau. I think you inhabit a very beautiful world. It most definitely has its place, and long may it continue.
Yes.
And if you say that you're a trader of sentimentality, I would like to come back with a sort of graceful lob over the net and say that perhaps I would regard myself as a trader of aesthetics and ethics, because there are a number of eco-positive benefits also associated with laboratory grown diamonds.
Can you, just as a quick question, Joanna, can you actually commission a laboratory grown diamond to your own sort of specification?
Yes, but it would have to be of quite a high weight, i.e. quite a high carat, to make that economically viable. Okay, thank you. Interesting for our audience to know. But talking about timeliness, we've been through a very, very difficult time during the pandemic over, the last year and a bit really now. And Helen, I just wondered if I could turn to you, because you've been, selling throughout this period, and you've been, sort of re-establishing your business, as I understand. How has the pandemic affected, say, you and the industry at large?
It has had a large impact. I mean, initially with the pandemic, we saw an immediate drop in the diamond prices on the global market. Most diamonds, 90% of diamonds, will go through in India to be cut, manufactured, and faceted. So the supply of diamonds onto the market was drastically reduced. But the world had to continue, and new routes to market were established, and we saw that diamonds continued to be traded. And one of the things Julie's mentioned is trading digitally has really, really soared. And along with that comes the challenge to how to trade with transparency, and technology is allowing us to improve the way we represent a diamond online that is as compatible with seeing it and handling it, physically as well as virtually. We've actually seen diamond prices continue to rise, partly because supply has dropped, but because demand has increases for the reasons that John was talking about, we were referring to before, because never before has the giving and receiving of a diamond been so important. So the secret was to adapt and to change, but diamonds, I think, will have more of a relevance, especially with some of these diamond mines closing. And as I say, we saw a trend change. We saw more interest in not necessarily what we've been told are the best diamonds, but what we are able to look at and see. So lower colours, lower clarities. But I think the biggest change has been really the relevance of giving a diamond. It is so important. If I may just hop onto the point about transparency and the supply chain. Yes, the Kimberley process was introduced. Our listeners may know about the concept of blood diamonds. The diamond industry had to do an awful lot to clean up its act, and the Kimberley process was the first step in that. It was actually found not to go far enough. So there's a system of warranties which not only looks at diamonds in the rough, but every time diamonds change hands as well. And given also what I'm talking about, trading online, we all require independent verification, which is what certification gives, but we all demand, both the industry and the consumer, greater transparency along the supply chain. And I think more people are asking more questions. But it comes full circle, and I want to end with storytelling, because it goes back to more and more people want that intimacy, and it's listening to the consumer's story and connecting them with their perfect diamond.
That's excellent, yeah.
Fascinating. If anyone hasn't read it, I read it recently, the book by Nick Koshan called The Washing Machine, which has an entire chapter dedicated to diamonds. I found quite illuminating. But Julie, coming back to sort of marketing and really looking at some of the points that have been picked up, are diamonds going to be around forever? I'm trying to avoid cliches here, but they've been with us for a long time. We have new types of consumers emerging, such as millennials. Do you think that they are going to be for everyone in the future? Will this continue?
What a great question, Pandora. I mean, my personal opinion about that is that they will continue to have relevance because it is an emotional gift. I used to work for De Beers also some years ago, and I still think it is the ultimate gift of love, and so many people still think that, and that is still is going to be here to stay, I think. And nowadays, I think people are also going to be looking at how a diamond, not just a diamond, but the design of the ring as well, how it represents them. They probably will want to get more involved potentially with the process of even designing, truly understanding the stages that a piece of jewelry goes through in order to become what it is. And as John said, in terms of the history and the relevance and the stories around the gifting of diamonds, I mean, there's the most extraordinary stories. And it's really the romance of gifting a piece of jewelry to a loved one for many, many different reasons. So I do think that they will, gifting jewelry, gifting diamonds in general will continue to be very relevant and will probably become even more popular, especially with the millenniums and especially with the Chinese market. I think now there's a real mix of different types of values that consumers want to embed and reflect in the products that they're going to be buying and that they also invest in. Yeah, so that's how I would.
Yeah, I think I read that gifting is about 50% of the market, if I'm not mistaken. So it's significant, isn't it?
And I think it will rise. I think it really will rise as well. And there's so many different options on the market. I mean, I love what Joanna's doing as well. I mean, I definitely want to come and see you. It just sounds so exciting. And the history and the romance, and she's right in terms of one has to educate yourself in terms of, and there is so much information online that you can educate yourself. And then there's John, who has this extraordinary knowledge. I mean, gosh, we're so lucky to have you here today.
I don't think so.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a great range of expertise.
Absolutely. I mean, I just think that it's an incredibly exciting industry to be working in, and I feel very privileged to be part of that, as I believe all of us do. But I think that it is nowadays, again, putting digital in front, being very brand savvy, and what I'm going back to, being really clear about what a diamond jewelry brand is offering in terms of the niche market that you're talking to, and how to communicate your brand offering is so key. And then really getting your brand identity in place is absolutely important as well, visually. Being very clear about what your strategy is, and making sure that you're resonating and you're authentic, so you're branding with purpose.
Great advice for our panelists. Thank you, Julie. And we have about 10 minutes left, or a bit less than 10 minutes actually. So I will turn briefly to some more questions, if that's okay with you all. We have a question about the specific challenges faced with the current EU restrictions and the UK trade agreements. Goodness, I don't know how I would be able to answer that. Are there any significant impacts within the industry? Can anyone answer that question?
That's not for me.
Here in Vienna in Central Europe, so I'm British, as you can tell, but I live here for personal reasons, and without wishing to delve into a potentially contentious political discussion here, I can say that the word on the street here, from my own experience, is that it has made operating significantly more difficult. And one is, as a British company in Austria, I'm definitely on the back foot, even as simple, even in terms of receiving goods here, I have to pay all sorts of additional tariffs and duties. And just general operations are incredibly difficult as a result of Brexit. That's not a political statement, that's just from a practical operative perspective.
Yes, I would agree with that. There's a shrinkage now of material that is actually obtainable. Brexit has created a problem, of course, for the business, because a diamond coming in now from Europe that previously there was just, it would come into this country or leave this country, it's now subject to VAT. So there is clearly going to be a problem on availability and just of the sheer logistics of getting stones over. So there is a drying up of merchandise available. If someone like me has an inquiry from a private client that they want to have a diamond sourced, a pair of earrings, whatever it might be, normally one goes to a dealer, and it'd be simple method to get the diamonds over from Antwerp or whatever it may be for availability for examination. If the client didn't want the goods, they go back to Antwerp, easy peasy, no problem at all. But now there's a whole new different setup going on. So it has created a problem. It's changing the whole structure of availability, but also the pricing structure of stones too. And this is a worry going forward. No doubt we'll get through this, but for those of us who are seeking goods to locate on behalf of the private client network, and this is what Helen does, this is what I do, these are tricky times as far as just the sheer difficulty in sourcing the right material for the right client at the right price. And this is a worry. And so I'm glad that the question was asked, because it does pose problems, I think, for the consumers and for the facilitators like us as well.
Great, fantastic. I've had one more question from someone who's not clear how a diamond is produced or how long it takes to produce and the technology that's used. I assume they are referring to laboratory grown diamonds. Joanna, how long would it take to produce a diamond?
Typically between 5 to 6 weeks. There are two main methods: high temperature, high pressure, which is what it says on the can, which is kind of the more, dare I say, antiquated method of producing diamonds, where great heat and pressure is applied to diamond material in the laboratory, or the more innovative and contemporary method, which is known as CVD, chemical vapor disposition, which involves the diamond wafer and methane gas heated at around 3000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, thank you. Well, that's really enlightened us. And on the subject of enlightenment, I think, David, if we could have our second and final poll, we wanted to really ask at the end of this, because we've got a couple of minutes left, really, if you feel that you have learned something useful from this webinar. And while David is putting up the poll, I would also like to mention that we do have a feedback survey. So it will be at the end of the webinar just coming up, and we really hope that you will contribute to that and send in any further questions that our panelists can answer after the event. And I would just like to say that the next IORMA webinar will be in 2 weeks' time, same day, Thursday at 2. And the subject is digital identity and who needs it. Sounds pretty interesting to me. So I think hopefully you're going to join. And we have 100%. Well done, panelists. I think you have done your job. But any further questions, people obviously can submit those to us at IORMA, which we will distribute out to the panelists. So that's absolutely fantastic. Does anyone have any final comments on the panel that they would like to share with us? I would just like to ask Julie a little personal question. Congratulations, I gather you've just got married. What was your engagement ring?
That's really sweet of you. Thank you. It's really lovely. I have a beautiful emerald cut diamond with two little baguettes on either side. Yeah, so it's very beautiful. But I'm actually looking for a wedding band now. So,
are you going to show us?
Oh, sure. Okay. Here.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Lovely. Well done.
It's very generous. Thank you.
This is the subject of the webinar, so we do like to see some jewelry here.
That's
so
sweet.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Pandora, for a great session today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And David, I will leave it to you to sign us off in due course. But thank you, everyone who attended, and any questions we didn't get to, we will come back to you soon.